Our first agenda item tonight is a consideration by the town board to do a resolution to adopt local law repeal, to repeal in its entirety Chapter 103 of the Code of the Town of Webster, which is called the Aircraft, Airports, and Heliports Law. I'll call it, Charlie. You can call it what you want, because I think you wrote it.
Actually, Supervisor Nesbitt wrote it, and we made some changes to it.
I didn't realize Supervisor Nesbitt wrote law. He's a man of many talents, I'll tell you that. This is a little bit of a different resolution than we do about, what, 300 plus resolutions a year. And we'll maybe give, depending upon the complexity of it, we might not even give an explanation if it's approving a purchase order, things like that. This one's on the other side of the spectrum. I think there's going to be a little, probably, I'll call it discussion by the town board. Maybe town board members would like to opine on where they're at in this process. 3 weeks ago in this boardroom, there was a public hearing on this. We heard, I think, Dolly, from 26 different people, 21 in attendance, and then 5 write-ins that were written into the record. We also have accumulated some other people's comments since then. They don't go into the public hearing record, but certainly the town board members have been forwarded those so they can look at this thing from every angle, so they can make an informed, educated vote on this. I think some of you, in fact, I saw Debbie on the 8th, a week later, as we were leaving the board, and you said, well, how did the vote go? And I said, well, we tabled it, or we took it off the agenda for the night, because the town board had decided we had so many documents and requests for information that we had not gotten yet, or got so late in the process that we didn't have enough time to really discern. So we put it off on the 8th and put it tonight, because last week Patty ran a wonderful board meeting. There was only 4 of us here, and I say once again, you can do a resolution and get a majority, 3 or 4, when there's only 4 board members here. But I go back to the complexity of this. It really merits having all 5 of us in the boardroom and all 5 of us voting on this. And I think it was said back on November 1st, I think this will be the last time until April 4th, okay, that all 5 of the town board members will be in the same room at a board meeting. So that's my prelude to this. With that being said, do any of the board members want to lead off with any comments or findings or anything about this potential resolution?
Everybody's looking my way, so I guess I will start. Since everybody's looking my way, I did a lot of research on this, so I'm happy to start. I know there's a lot of emotion, as you said, around this, Tom, and a lot of people came to speak for and against repealing this law in its entirety. And we listened to those, and I summarized the folks who were against repealing the law. Primary concerns there were safety, noise, and lastly, the fact that the law only benefits very few or one person. The primary considerations of those in favor of repealing this law was that the FAA governs the skies. Certainly, there are a number of boards other than the FAA. There's the New York State Department of Transportation. There's also the National Transportation Safety Board, which has an awful lot of information. So there are pilot training requirements, there are strict maintenance requirements, and some of the other comments were disinformation, fear, and questionable motivation. Those were the summary of the folks for and against. So when I look at some of the things with noise safety, starting with noise, I did some research on noise and decibels that a helicopter would make. At 100 feet, the noise that a helicopter makes is similar to that of a chainsaw, jackhammer, power tools, or a motorcycle. That's at 100 feet. I think most of the neighbors are more in between, say between 100 feet and 500 feet. At 500 feet, the noise goes down to basically the sound of a lawnmower or a very large barking dog. It's not a big dog, but a dog. Beyond that, at a mile, it's the same sound as a vacuum cleaner. So from a noise perspective, to me, it would seem that the noise that this helicopter would make for the short period of time it was taking off and landing would be very commensurate with other types of sounds that you might find in the neighborhood. Another thing was about it being in a residential neighborhood, so as I would do if I was on the planning board, or when I was on the planning board, I actually walked around the area. And while DeWitt Road is certainly a residential area, the piece of property where where the one individual in Webster who currently has a helicopter comes in and takes off and lands from, the neighbor is really Route 104. Route 104 to the south and to the west is the bay and about, 30 plus acres of an open field. So from that aspect, I would think that there certainly is, from a noise and from a space, I would say, I would conclude that it's really not that atypical. A helicopter, I guess, is somewhat atypical, but the noise it would make is not atypical of what you might find in a neighborhood. From a safety perspective, I think, and this was mentioned and it's very true, many helicopter accidents include, are a cause of pilot negligence. And there was some information shared at the meeting about helicopter crashes. I would say, unofficially, what I can find on the internet, there was 17 helicopter accidents, and they're mostly, or if not all, in the New York City area. You will find there were 94 helicopter accidents in all of 2003. So between April of 2003 and February of 2004, there were 94 helicopter accidents. And that's across the entirety of the United States. Most of those accidents happen in areas where they have a higher, obviously, number of helicopters. And in addition to that, in areas where there is tourism and there are helicopter tours. So of those 94 accidents, not that any fatality is, nobody wants any fatalities, but the fatality rate in a helicopter accident is about 20%. So I just, when you look at this data, and I mean, lots of things are dangerous, but helicopters are right in the middle of any other form of transportation as it relates to safety risk from being in or near a helicopter. I also spoke with a commercial helicopter pilot because I work at an aerial imagery company, so I do have some extra context about what it takes to fly commercial or private aircraft. And one of the reasons that the fatality rates tend to be so low in helicopters is because there are certain FAA requirements for where you can fly and how you can fly. And you need to make sure as you're flying, you can have an appropriate glide path to landing, because with a helicopter, you actually can land it by gliding, which is part of the reason why the accidents aren't as if they aren't fatal on average. So that was my safety sorry, I'm going through. The other thing, this kind of goes to the safety aspects of maintenance, and then what some folks were saying about the FAA requirements. So when you think about this law that Webster has, it's almost like it's an extra layer, but there are very stringent laws from the FAA and the New York State Department of Transportation that govern helicopters and any aircraft. And the part that I'm actually very familiar with is the maintenance. So Eagle View has like over 100 aircraft, and every single one has to go for scheduled maintenance and ongoing maintenance, and those planes can't fly unless they are in perfect mechanical condition, which is why the FAA is in place, and they have those rules to protect the health, welfare, and safety of the people who are around those types of vehicles or aircraft. There is also regular training that is required and rules. So this one I looked up, I don't know that this is the only one, but the FAA Pilot Flights and Ground Instructors, Chapter 14, Subchapter F, Part 91, it speaks to the level of training that a helicopter pilot would need, and that they have to maintain with ongoing training to be able to fly. So I think that you have the New York State Department of Transportation, you have federal agencies to ensure the health, welfare, safety of regulated helicopters in New York State. That's that. There were a couple of other things that I think I would like to share that are not necessarily pertinent to the law, but to address some of the comments that were made towards me as the treasurer of the Republican Committee, which I was for a couple of years. And if I go back and look at all donations dating back to 2006, the average contribution is $432. The highest contribution from any single organization was nearly $9,000 at $8,996. The top 10 non-candidate contributions averaged $3,972. If you look at a shorter period from 2015, it went up to $3,486. So when you look at the contributions from John Kashani of $1,500 to the Democratic Committee, or to Tom's campaign, or to the Republican campaign, those are not out of line with any other organizations or individuals who contribute to political organizations. And in addition to that, John also donated another $1,100 to a number of other campaigns for judges, Ontario, other town council, and the Democratic Committee in Walworth. So all of this information is public. You can find it very easily on the New York State Campaign Finance website. So, I appreciate the comment, I appreciate the perspective you can have that this is a payoff for changing the law. But when you look at that in total, I would just like to say that that is not what that was, and it really is not even the appearance of that. Then lastly, and Councilman Cahill said this at the last meeting in the closing remarks, specifically about Tony Kashani. Tony has been on the planning board, or has chaired the planning board for, I don't know, probably 30 some odd, close to 40 years. And one of the comments was made that by former Supervisor Nesbitt, that Tony, basically bribed him, or he took it as a bribe that Tony was trying to get him to repeal this law. And I think if that truly was the case, then I don't know why Tony would still be on the planning board. And I just think that that was not fair and a little out of bounds as it relates to this law or it relates to Tony personally. So those are my comments.
Thank you. And just to follow up on your last few statements, I did speak to two people who were reportedly told about this attempted bribe. Neither one of these people recalled the past supervisor stating that Mr. Kashani attempted a bribe. And it would seem to me that something of that magnitude they would remember. So, again, I've known Mr. Kashani for a number of years, and he's probably one of the most honorable and hardworking men that I know. And I thank you again for your service to this community, sir. Just to follow up on some of the comments you made regarding the FAA and their regulations, I went through many of the same documents that you went through, and helicopters are very, very heavily regulated, not only from a maintenance standpoint, but more importantly from a flight standpoint, coming in and going out. And I don't know if you had commented about the requirements for the actual pilots and the physicals that they have to go through also.
I did not comment
So
on
I
that.
just wanted to mention that. And when I was reading the minutes that Dolly put together, a number of people spoke that they were against the removal of Section 103 because it would benefit just one person. And in my opinion, Section 103 was put in place purely as a punitive measure against one person. So that's all I had to say.
I can certainly understand, and Jen, I really appreciate all the research that you did. It's certainly very thorough. And when I listened to those who came to the public hearing, I took several notes and tallied it all up. There were 10 people who thought it was a good idea that we repeal this law. 4 of them were pilots. I would expect them to say nothing else. There were 16 people who spoke against, many of whom are still in what is considered the neighborhood. And just have to say that I'm not sure that a heliport, landing a helicopter, is really a proper thing for a neighborhood. And I appreciate the maintenance and the safety concerns and the training. Let's not forget that all of those things are in place for anyone who flies a plane, no matter what that aircraft is. And yes, they go through safety checks. Last night on the news, there was a plane where the wing was falling off. A door blew out of another one. All of these aircraft went through vigorous safety precautions and inspections. But the bottom line to me is this is not an appropriate thing for a neighborhood.
Well, the thing that really impacted me when I was reading through the regulations is the fact that the FAA regulates the flight path, and if they were to come to the determination that it's not safe to enter or to leave.
Talk into your microphone. I'm hearing people say they can't hear you.
So the thing that had the biggest impact on me with respect to the helicopters in that area is the fact that the FAA regulates the flight path. And if they did not feel it was safe, they would not come to the determination that it would be allowed. And that to me, they're more of an expert than you or I or anyone on this board, in my opinion.
Okay, this is my opinion. Again, this is my opinion. And I thank you, Tony, for your years of service. And it's great to know your feeling as well. But this is my own perspective. You know, I do respect homeowners' property right. To be clear and fair, we do care about the safety of our citizens here in Webster. Instead of a local law repeal, don't just end it. Why don't we just amend it or change it? and to add the helipad, on at least 2 or more acres of land adjacent to the lake or the bay, because the FHA made, approve so. So this way, when the person or anyone that take off on landing, they're not gonna go over people's houses or buildings. And it's not for personal use. We can add that, in there, in the law, and then, it's only for personal use only, but not for commercial use. And the applicant can apply to use a permit from the town if more than one, have the helicopter, and we will need to, spend the time and money to,
Well, I think one thing that's very important to note here is that this law is just about taking off and landing in the town of Webster. Anybody can fly a plane over Webster, anybody can fly a helicopter over the town of Webster at any time. And if we repeal this law, it does not mean that planes or helicopters will not be flying over Webster. They just won't be taking off and landing on the ground or water surface area of Webster. Just to your point, Ginny, about safety and saying, we don't want helicopters flying over houses. They will be. At the Army Reserve Center, they have helicopters flying in and out of there, and I would argue that it's more densely populated there than it is at the end of DeWitt Road.
Yeah, that's true, but then you don't want to have a Pandora open up and have people flying all over, and what they wanted to land, I have 2 acres in my backyard, and they land in my backyard.
Well,
So there should be a,
To your point that you're making, you don't want to open up Pandora's box by getting rid of this law.
no,
Someone in the village of Webster, or someone that has 2 acres of land, still has to go through the stringent process of contacting and working with the FAA, New York State Department of Transportation, Aviation Boards, and they will come out and they will do the evaluation. And if they determine that it's not safe, they will not be allowed. The flight path is strictly determined based upon evaluation of the FAA. And I don't think anybody in the village of Webster is going to be allowed by the FAA.
The other thing is what's before us is to repeal this law, not to amend it.
Correct.
well, again, it's just my suggestion.
That was awesome. Very nice, Jennifer. Welcome to the board. That was a lot of research. Appreciate that. Okay. John Kashani is not in the room tonight. He's the 800-pound gorilla. That doesn't mean he's overweight, Tony, okay? I have a question before I give my comments. Because Tony, I know you and your son are very close. So I'm going to say that you are de facto, your answer probably would be the one that came out of John's mouth. If the board repeals this law today, and Charlie, whatever that means as far as tomorrow is done, or
It would still have to go to the Secretary of State.
whenever it is filed, the day it's filed, the repeal, would John think he, on that day, can start landing on that heliport and taking off?
Well, I don't know how the law works now.
If the law wasn't there,
If the law is repealed.
yes, the law is no longer in existence.
Okay, will he land tomorrow? Is that
Should,
what you're saying?
Yes.
just,
Yes.
Tony be up at the microphone or something, just for
I
his
don't-
benefit?
For people to hear it, like I said, I appreciate, we're not gonna hold you to this,
I
but
can't answer directly, but if that was the case, somebody would have to say, John, don't fly until we get this thing totally resolved. I'm 100% agree.
well, what
And I don't know.
What would be totally resolved, because I'm gonna pose the question again before I give my comments. if the law is repealed, and when it's formally repealed with the Secretary of State, whatever, it's as though the law never existed going forward, right?
Correct.
Going forward.
Going forward.
Right.
So if there's no law to prohibit landing and taking off a helicopter, do you think John would think at that point, free at last, I can land the helicopter and take it off at my FAA-approved heliport and New York State Department of Aviation-approved registered heliport?
Well, my guess is probably so, because without a law, there's nothing that says you can't do that. It's an open field. And on the other
Right.
side of the coin, we have, like you said before, there are seaplanes landing with boats all over
Okay.
the Point Bay.
Tony, thank you, and I appreciate, I probably should have had, but
Tom?
here's my concern.
One thing
Yeah.
before you go, with respect to your question regarding the law, if it's not in the books, there is a stringent process that Mr. Kashani or anyone else has to go through prior to taking off or landing from a heliport, okay? And one of those steps is obviously getting sanctioned by the FAA, but there is a point where they have to come to the board, it's my understanding from what I read.
And John, that's what I'm gonna comment on.
Okay.
Okay, because
Yeah.
I guess when people take that podium, and tonight people will take that podium in a public hearing for the conveyance plan. When people take that podium for the 5 minutes open to the public at a board meeting, it's been an interesting 4+ years for me as supervisor, because I like facts and truth and really try the best I can to be straight with people at open meetings like this or face-to-face with them. People get on that podium and either intentionally or unintentionally BS us all the time for reasons that run the gamut, okay? But when Jared Hurt, the attorney for John Kashani in this, that you have combated with, have you not, Charlie, over the years on the different lawsuits or whatever?
Well, not on the lawsuits, but in particular.
Okay,
Mr.
when an
Kashani,
attorney
yes.
takes that podium, I tend to hold that person's words to a higher standard than when anybody else takes the podium and can just say whatever they want. So when Jared Hurt took the podium back 3 weeks ago tonight, he said something that resonated with me so much that you might notice in these meetings, I write down things. I write down things that I gotta go and check on. And what he said it is an incredibly robust process
Yes.
with the FAA, the New York State Department of Transportation Aviation Division, and the town board. So, this town board thing, when I went to start asking questions, and Tony, you were in on these emails, I asked on Saturday the 3rd, less than 2 days after the public hearing, okay, now that we've had the public hearing, here's some things, and I asked 3 questions, and I said, Charlie and Jared, you're the guys who are the attorneys. I'm doubting Thomas. I want to see documentation that substantiates what he said on that podium. Over the last 20 days, I've been surprised, maybe I'm not a good communicator, maybe I didn't ask the questions correctly, but I'm concerned that I'm not getting documentation that, at least in this old accountant's eyes, is ticking and tying and supporting that robust process. Now, when I go to Dolly McGuire and I say, Dolly, you're our town clerk, I need to know if there's anything in the town records, at board meetings, that was about this subject, whatever. She comes back in 24 hours with stuff from 1963, 1978. She finds that stuff, right? Now I understand, finite records, town of Webster. I said to Charlie and Jared, if you're telling me that at the 930 other towns in New York, or whatever it is, that don't have a specific law, that those towns, anybody with a heliport in those towns has to go through the FAA, the New York State Department of Aviation, and their town board. Could you please go and look for the last 5 or 10 years of precedent cases, if you want to call it that went before those town boards after they got the FAA and whatever. Now, Charlie, I don't know what you researched. I don't know what the database was. I don't know if it was Association of Towns, but your answer back to me was, I found none. Now, what does that mean? It either means that Charlie, and Jared was quiet too, all right? It either means he found the resource at the Association of Towns would have such an answer, or such a hearing, and there were none. So it sounds like, does that mean nobody has ever in New York State, in the 930 towns, gotten a heliport in the last 5 to 10 years? I find that hard to believe.
You can't prove something by something that doesn't.
I'm just saying. And I'm going to tell you something. When I started my research, I didn't have a dog in the fight. I just like facts. I just wanted to know, I wanted to see how the process that Jared explained, how it played out. What was the application process? How did they come out and do this? What kind of license do they get? How long does it last? Is it renewed every 5 years? Is it this and that? And maybe I just didn't answer the question right, but I didn't get the documents I thought I was going to get that supported this robust process that included, and I can't be more key on this, that included a town board shot at the apple, bite at the apple. Now, I thought, we get a bite at the apple. This is a no-brainer for me. This law is a joke. Why would this law have ever been written 17 years ago if in the normal course of a heliport, you gotta go through the town board anyway? Right? That's what Jared said. Wasn't that the process that was
Yes.
described to us?
Correct.
Have any of the board members seen proof that the way it's done is a town board part of that process to approve, and it's zoning and neighborhoods and stuff like that? Because just because the FAA says okay on this place, and just because the New York State Department of Transportation and Aviation says it's okay, the way it was described, and Jared sent some cut and paste stuff over to us, hey, this is frequently asked questions, the town board has a shot at it. But as we sit here tonight, I don't see anything. I wanted to see some precedent town board answers on these things. From a town in Binghamton, from a town up north, from a town on Long Island, because I don't want to recreate the wheel. I wanted to see, well, what do they, what is the town board's bite at the apple? What are the things they take a bite at the apple once the FAA, allegedly, and the New York State Department of Transportation, Aviation, has said yes. What would the town board at that point be ruling on? I couldn't guess. So I figured, Charlie, pull a couple precedent cases, maybe it'll start to, come into clarity of what they rule on. Is it the neighborhood thing, Patty? Is it the flight pattern? But to our surprise, and once again, Charlie, I'm not holding to you to this.
Yeah.
When Dolly tells me she looked back in the records of the town of Webster, when I asked her about a subject, I would like you to find something, if there's anything on the town board records, of Tony Kashani's heritage. You go through it, and if you find nothing, I feel very confident we've never done a town board resolution or whatever in 70 years on Tony Kashani's haircut. Sorry, I didn't mean to use that as an example, but there it is.
It's getting whiter.
What he researched, and whether it is in totality, you can't prove a negative. You just told me you found nothing. That concerns
There's
me.
something right here.
You found a town?
I didn't find a town.
Oh, I got that from Jared.
But you have this from the New York State Department of Transportation, so I guess if you email their aviation department, you can ask that question, because it states right here, the first step in airport or heliport establishment or modification is FAA airspace review and approval, which examines impacts on nearby aviation facilities, blah, 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 right? And call this person if the local.
Jen, I have that from him.
Yeah.
Does that just mean that every other town, if there's been 100 heliports in New York State in the last 10 years, that just no town ever followed that?
Oh, it's
Possible.
it establishes a process, Tom. My understanding of that is, I'd read the same.
I think the question is, and this is not to go into your side, the question is whether the process has ever been used. That's really curious.
Oh,
It's something.
Well, if that's the process, okay, and I don't really care about the other towns. Other towns might not even know about that process, okay? That might be an answer to why there's no precedent. But if that is what came from, okay, because I want to make sure, when we talk about amending this law and this and that, think about some of the things you said, Jenny. To me, I'm like, why do we gotta amend the law for that? If the process has the town board have a bite at the apple on this thing, we just get rid of the law and do it at that point in the already established practice or process through what, 249 and FAA and whatever.
Okay.
I get that. But I was having a hard time understanding what is the towns in that process? What do they discern in that process? What is it about? Is it, and I just figured if I found a precedent case, because obviously towns follow that process. Maybe they don't.
Well, I actually did that research too, and I don't have the number in front of me, but when you look, there is not a lot of helicopters in the United States. So the fact that you might not come across that wouldn't be too astounding or alarming, because I don't think it's a pretty common thing.
Okay, but here's the thing, and I understand that John, and I'm done now almost. I'll come full circle back to asking Mr. Kashani to be the de facto guy. John will watch this, so John will hear it from my mouth. If his thought was that if we repeal it tonight, that once it goes to the Secretary of State and it's papered up and it's law now, or should I say it's not law anymore, that he's landing that day and taking off and having a big party. He's not, because he's still got to go through this robust process.
Yes.
And I want to make sure he understands that, and I don't understand the process enough at this point to even give a timeline of, okay, the law is now repealed. Charlie, when do we come to the board? Is it now that he's got FAA approval of that site? Now that he's got registration with New York City Aviation? When it comes to the town board, what are we ruling on at that point?
There's two ways you can come to the board. Either the board can ask the FAA for it to weigh in on the approval.
Correct.
Or the applicant can ask the FAA to work on. However, there's also the issue of whether or not, and I'm not going to get into this too much, but the fact is this still a permitted use? There's a question. Just because it's not in there doesn't mean it's a permitted use.
Yes.
And it is only.
Well, I want to set expectations if this gets repealed tonight. Obviously, we've spent about 40 minutes on it. Where was that? You have the paper copy. I'm looking for Jared's send over of the frequently asked questions.
While you're looking for that,
Yeah.
I said initially when we first started going down this road that I might be able to consider an amendment, like Ginny mentioned, but that is not what the applicant wanted us to look at this time.
That is correct.
So I go back to what's before us tonight is a full repeal of this law. If we're going to go to amendment, we would have to go through an entire new public hearing process.
That is correct. So what you have as a printout is what I'm going through just digitally. In that packet, it's a bit of a cut and paste. It's not, if you really look at it, there's some cut and paste there. But this is the frequently asked questions, commonly asked questions. New York General Business Law, Section 249. What do I do if there is no local zoning? You must still apply to the locality and ask for their approval. What can I do if the local government doesn't wish to approve or take no action in regards to the airport or airport improvement proposal? I assume that means heliports too. You'll have to talk to your locality further. I don't know. I just couldn't find specificity that gave us a blueprint of that process. I think I understand the FAA side. I think I understand the aviation department at New York State Department of Transportation. I don't understand our side. And I don't know if John factored that repealing this, if we do that tonight, is a step in the process, because it will, if he wants to land there, he's gonna be right back here at some point in the future, and you'll have to do some, what are we doing in this section 249 that is this very robust process with the FAA, the New York State Department of Aviation, and the town board? What are we doing? because we have a bite at the apple. That's the way it reads. And I really I don't like to read it. I wanted to see what other town boards, what did they rule on this? We haven't found it. Maybe we just didn't look at the totality of the database.
I can say absolutely that without town board approval, a helicopter or heliport or an airport cannot be built. Or
Correct.
cannot be built. So we're not talking again about the flying so much as the construction of the heliport.
Taking off and landing, yeah.
That's
Flight path.
the issue, I think, that's before the board.
Right.
And that cannot be done without town board approval and consequently with approval of the
Yeah.
Department of Transportation. No, not the FAA.
Or the
Department of Transportation.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And yes, helicopter can be used interchangeably with fixed wing. Right?
Well,
If I had thought about that, I would have reached out to the aviation department of New York and asked that question in advance. Because
I say again, you know why we're having such conversation on a resolution for 45? It's complex. I do agree with John, what you said about, I found the irony at the public hearing that, you know, this repeal is only for the benefit at this point of one person. It's true. I think the law 17 years ago was punitive and put in as a penalty to one person. That doesn't fly in my, no pun intended, in my view of how you govern. I might not like you, but I'm going to try to be unbiased, building a law around being pragmatic to 45,000 citizens. I hope I never go down that path of pushing for something that is because I don't like you.
I think you have 4 other people on this board, so you're going to allow that to happen. Plus, I don't think you want to do
We're
that.
all human, so let's face it, we're not robots. I mean, it enters into our minds, but can you imagine, even if all 5 of us didn't like a certain person, that we would be writing a law? That's odd to me, but
Right.
whatever. So, as long as John understands, if there is a motion, a second, and it passes repeal 3-2, 4-0, 4-1, 5-0, 5-0, he's not landing his helicopter on DeWitt Road tomorrow. I don't know when he's going to be, because I don't understand what Jared heard. Stood up at that podium and passionately talked as an attorney about the process. And in the 20 days since, I have been asking questions through email, and I get it where emails can be confusing, whatever. I didn't get the answers in the documentation that I assumed that I was going to get, that gave clarity to this process that the town board has as a bite as the apple. And I don't think any of the town board members, or Charlie, you don't know what that bite at the apple is. What it looks like.
What the Department of Transportation will expect of us.
Look, do we have the flexibility to say, we don't want it in a neighborhood, a residential neighborhood, a zoning thing, right? Do we have the ability to say, because to tell you the truth, I didn't see anything in the paperwork that said, you are going to take off from this heliport, you are going to fly east over the bay, and that's how you're going to come back in. You will never be less than 500 feet over a house that's to the east on Colorado. I didn't see anything like that in this approval. I see the approval that was sent said conditional. Now, I don't know what the conditions are of that FAA conditional approval from 2004 or 6 or whatever. And if those conditions are still in effect today by the FAA. Tony, you're an honest guy. I don't make decisions on what somebody tells me. I make decisions on seeing. Ronald Reagan, trust and verify. In my book, verify is paper trail and documents, and I don't have them.
That's what Jared said in number 4 of his thing today. He said, this gets repealed, the next step is 4. You put number 4. That would be to go through the process, whatever it is. So no, be aware he isn't going to fly there tomorrow.
I appreciate the fact that, you're asking questions, but we're really not following our normal decorum with the town board and having conversations with members of the audience.
Yeah,
I
correct.
just wanted to mention that.
No doubt, and it's a complex issue, and I understand a lot of eyes on here. I don't think everybody's in here is like really interested in the conveyance pipe. Maybe I'll be wrong. I know what's going on here. Everybody, let's just call a spade on this one. So, with that being said, there's 5 board members. There's the resolution. Is there someone making a motion, someone seconding it, and Dolly, then you add in whatever. Which the options are, Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong. Motion, we just had one back in December, nobody seconded it, dead. You can say, no motion, we don't want to do anything, which means dead, no repeal. Somebody could do a motion a second, and the next 3 people could say no, and then it was voted down.
I'll make a motion to adopt a local law to repeal in its entirety Chapter 103 of the Code of the Town of Webster, aircraft, airports, and heliports.
I'll second it.
Councilman Cahill,
Aye.
Councilwoman Wright,
Aye.
Councilwoman Wynn. This is very emotional for me. And like I said, I was elected to be put on this place to do what best for our community and to do what best for everyone. And it's not just for one individual. And sometimes a hard decision have to be made. And I don't want to lose friends, but I don't want to, think that this may affect the safety of our citizens in the community. So it's really, really hard for me to make this emotion. Therefore, I don't think I can. I don't think I can pass this. It's me.
Supervisor Flaherty?
Aye.
Councilwoman Gonzalez?
No.
Okay? That is that.